So our first step to create this sphere drawing is we're going to cover the paper with vine. This is the vine charcoal because it's thinner and it's going to give you a nice ground or a base. So I'm going to use the side of the stick. Oh my gosh, if I can hold it, I'm going to split it off. So I'm going to use the side of it. I am going to completely cover this paper. If you have texture on your drawing board, I'm seeing some texture from the table come through. You can just once in a while move around your paper so the texture isn't in the same spot, and it'll be just fine for what we're doing with this exercise. Okay, so I'm just covering the paper with the vine charcoal. I'm using the side of the stick. Then I'm going to use the oils of my fingers to blend that in. This is going to create a nice ground or a base. Okay, so you can see how this is just graying the paper. Yeah, it's called a ground.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So I can still see a little bit of this texture from the table. I'm going to go ahead and move my paper a little bit. So if this happens on your drawing board, it'll do the same thing. But if you have a nice smooth drawing board, you won't have to do this extra step. I'm just going to go ahead and move it a little bit so the texture's in a different spot. And I'm going to do this again. So I'm doing the same step. Vine charcoal again. So I'm going to blend using those oils of my fingers again to create a ground or a base. Same step as I just did. And I'm happy with that. I could smooth it out a little bit more, but for the sake of the exercise and the demonstration, I'm just going to go ahead and use what I have because we're going to cover this up. This is just a good base. All right, so now I'm going to sketch in the circle, making sure that I show a certain amount of things, and this is where you're going to fill in the right side of your paper. I'm going to point out where all of those different parts of the sphere are. So I'm going to start with the sphere. Here's the sphere itself. And charcoal is really cool because if you make a mistake, you can just kind of blend that back into your ground, since I have that there. If you forget that first step and you don't do the ground, then you can't blend that back in and you'll feel like you need to erase. So save yourself from having to go back and erase by doing that first ground. And it's much easier to blend everything after that. So I'm happy with this sphere. It doesn't have to be totally perfect, but I'm going to get to as close as I can get. I'm happy with that, and I have a couple extra lines, but that's cool too. Now I'm just going to map out for me where the light source is going to be. So this is going to be my light source. Okay, so the light's going to be coming from there, my light source. And then I'm going to map in where the direct light would be. The direct light is going to be where that light source is directly hitting any objects. In this, I only have one object, so I only have one spot where I'm going to have direct light, and this is going to be my extreme highlight there too. I'm also just going to map in, so I know for later, where my core shadow is going to be. My core shadow is going to be the darkest part of the sphere, and that's going to be actually right in the middle, and it kind of curves around with the sphere. Okay, so it's not going to be straight across like that because the sphere is curved. So I'm going to curve that core shadow, and it's going to kind of cradle the direct light. Okay. Some people think that it's going to be the darkest over here, but it's actually not going to be the darkest over there because we have some reflected light. So if I have a surface, if I draw in my ground line here, that's my ground line where the background's going to meet whatever surface this is sitting on. Okay, so this doesn't look like it's floating. There's going to be light from my light source that hits the table or the ground and reflects back into the sphere from over on this side. And that's my reflected light. So it's actually not going to be as dark here as it will be in my core shadow. So this is my core shadow right in the middle that's curving around the direct light. Over here is going to be my reflected light. So that's going to be in here. And then my cast shadow is going to be on the opposite side of that object. It's going to be over on this side. And when we shade that in later, it's actually going to be darker near my object. There's going to be more light able to get over here in the edge of the shadow, of my cast shadow. So it's actually going to be lighter over here later on. Now that I have the basics drawn in, I'm going to go ahead and shade my darkest part first. So I'm going to shade in, just blocking in this value of my core shadow. And it's okay if it's messy, because I'm going to blend this with the oils of my fingers later on. And you can actually I like to think of it as kind of like sculpting with charcoal. I'm gonna bring this value up towards my direct light, and it'll kind of fade on its own. And you'll really be able to see this when we get into compressed charcoal, but you can kind of start to see how that's working and forming with Vine alone.
So this whole thing is just gonna be with Vine?
No, I'm just starting with Vine. That's a good question. We're actually going to go in with compressed later, and it's going to make it so dramatic. I'm just mapping it in with Vine first, and this is what you'll do with every charcoal drawing, just so that you're sure of where everything goes before you put in those more permanent marks.
Are we doing this for our sketchbook?
No, you'll do this on this size paper. That's a good question too. Yeah, and this is right up front on the cart when you guys are ready to work. Okay, it's the larger of all the ones on the top. It's a half sheet of a full paper that you used for your contour line drawing earlier. Okay, so I'm blending that. That's pretty decent. I'm gonna go back and add more. Never feel like you can't go back once you've started to work with an eraser or your hands. All of these steps kind of go together. There's never gonna be like a for sure step 1, step 2, step 3 when it comes to shading. You're gonna constantly be working back with Vine, back with compressed. You'll be working with a kneaded eraser, all at the same time. Okay, so I'm gonna blend this up. You never want to see a dramatic line. You want this to all fade together. You're not going to add an outline later on either. All of your lines are going to come together by adding different values and creating that contrast. So I'm even looping this core shadow around the other side here, just a little bit, and then back down. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I could start to shade in this area here too, if I wanted to make this more dramatic, and this is going to be darker than this area here, so this is going to create that line. So this is an example of how the shadows, of the how the values are going to create line, because this darker value next to this reflected light area is going to create a line that emphasizes where that sphere is ending. Okay, and then you can do the same thing. You're just going to blend this out towards where your cast shadow gets lighter. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with what I have so far with Vine. I think I'm ready to start with compressed. Okay. What I'm going to do with compressed is pretty similar to what I just did. I'm just making it more dramatic. I'm not going to outline anything. You never want your objects completely outlined with compressed charcoal, because then you'll have a dramatic line, and we want everything to be created, all of those lines to be created by just the values touching and contrasting with each other, creating contrast. So I'm going in, mapping in my core shadow again. Okay. I'm going to blend this in. Okay, so that's nice and even. And I don't have to switch fingers. The oils of my fingers still work. It's okay if your finger gets messy. And then I'm going to start to move this up towards my direct light. I almost feel like you're sculpting with this drawing material, because you can move it almost like you're sculpting this sphere. You'll see that I'm even curving as I go around how the sphere would curve if I were to touch it in real life. This was a real three-dimensional sphere. You take that a little bit around the side, just a little bit. I can still see a line here, so that's why I'm kind of blending a little bit more. I'm going to blend up more towards this direct light. You can even go over it and go back with your kneaded eraser later if it gets too dark. Then I'm going to start to pull this down into where the reflected light is going to be, trying to get rid of this line that I drew in when I mapped in the core shadow. Okay. And it's okay if I go over this line, because I'm going to make it more dramatic later. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in, same thing that I did with the Vine, starting my cast shadow and mapping this in. And don't feel like if it's not looking exactly like mine at the start, that's okay. This is such a flexible material. You can go back and erase. You can go back and blend it all back in. If you're feeling frustrated at any point while you're doing this, it's not looking exactly like it is on my paper, that's fine. Call me over and I'll help you. Yeah, go ahead and take it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and blend this out. I'm doing the demo right now, so you can watch, but then you'll want to watch the beginning later on. So join on in. Okay, so I'm blending this out. It's still a little bit messy. I'm going to go back and touch stuff up later, but I'm happy with that right now. So I'm going to leave that. Okay. Now I'm gonna go back in, and this is really the kind of magical part. This is when it all starts to come together. I'm gonna put in a little background. I'm gonna put in the background. And that's gonna make this look like it's popping forward and it's three-dimensional. I'm gonna start where it's a little bit lighter over here. And to emphasize this part, I might even go back in and lighten up the top of the sphere because it's looking a little bit dark. And it's not gonna give me the contrast that I really want when I put in the background. So I like to kind of blot and just kind of dab where I want to erase to start so I don't get any dramatic lines because I'm really trying to avoid lines. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to go back in with my messy finger and blend this back in. It's going to lighten it up. So we still don't have any dramatic lines that we've drawn in. It's all created by value. Okay, so I'm okay with that. I might go back in and lighten it up later depending on how this background works. Now I'm going to go right next to the sphere here, and I am going to start to draw a line, but I'm not going to end with this line later on. I'm going to stop where the core shadow looks like it's starting because I want it to lighten up there, and I don't want it to be super dark next to that piece, because if it's really dark next to this core value where it's dark, the sphere will blend into the background. I want there to be contrast in that the background is making the lightness here emphasized in the sphere. So I'm going to go ahead and go on this side and stop where that core value is starting again. So I only put this line here next to where the lighter value of the sphere is, where the direct light is kind of hitting and fading off. And then I'm just going to draw this way, right next to this, because this is going to be the darkest part of my background to create that contrast. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and blend. I don't want that to smear onto my sphere, but if it did, you can always fix it with that kneaded eraser. Just because you're using compressed charcoal doesn't mean that it's totally permanent. It's just a little bit more difficult to erase than fine charcoal. So I'm going to go ahead and fade this out into my background. Okay, and I'm bringing this down to where my ground line is. Okay. I'm going to stop where my ground line is, because I'm going to go back with vine on my ground because I want this to be a more dramatic line. I don't want to fade that into the foreground, into the front of my drawing. So I'm going to pull this onto this side too. What we want to avoid, and what you'll hear other artists talk about, is a halo around the objects. I don't want there to be like a force field looking area between my object and the background, so I might need to go back and make this line even closer so there isn't a highlight surrounding the sphere, because it'll make it look unrealistic and it won't pop off the page as successfully. It won't look as 3D as I could make it. Go back. Again, I'm not drawing here because I want it to be a little bit lighter here in the background where my core shadow starts. Okay. If you kind of run out of charcoal that you could use on your finger, you can always go back in. I'm going to just draw over here because the background over here is okay if that's really dark. And I'm going to blend this in and bring it back down towards my sphere. Okay, so you're going to fill in this whole background, go to town over here, get a little bit messy. I'm going to end up covering up where I drew in my light source. We don't need that later on. That was just as a reference. And then I'm going to blend all of this. We don't want to end up with scribbles. And make this a solid background. It's just going to end up getting a little bit lighter near this dark value on the sphere. Blending this towards the ground line, but not crossing that ground line. Okay, so you're going to just keep blending that in. I'm going to go in and actually put this line back in and stop where that core shadow starts again, because I want it to be popping out till I get to the ground line, and I'm going to even go back and add this ground line back in again. I know this is a lot. If you need to go back and watch this again, I'm going to post this video right on Google Classroom so you guys can watch it. And I'm stopping at that where that core shadow starts, blending this back out. So you can see how the sphere is starting to pop out. I don't really like how I've lost this shape here. It looks like my sphere kind of has a dent and it's flat right there, so I'm just going to go in And blot this a little bit. Clean my kneaded eraser by pulling it apart. Going back in, blotting a little bit. Be blending that out a little. And then going back in with where I want my line. I'm blending that outward. Okay, so I still have a lot of blending to do. I'm going to end up with a completely solid background. And I have that example up on the screen for you so you can look at that too. But just so you guys can get started, I am going to stop here. If you wanted to really finish this, you would blend in all of this background area, clean up some of your lines just a little bit, and I'm going to actually go back and where this cast shadow stops with my compressed charcoal that I put in, I'm going to just add a little bit more vine and blend that in as well, so that this is really highlighted and that pops out too. So I'm just going to do this for the rest of the ground as well, just around where this compressed charcoal stops. Yeah, go ahead and take one. Okay, just blend
Isn't it
that
lighter
in.
here?
Yeah, you'll do this over here too. So this is where your vine will start.
But isn't it lighter here than there?
Oh yeah, right now it is.
No, but isn't it supposed to be like on the thing?
Oh yeah, on the paper too, because your light source is over here,
Yeah.
it's definitely going to reach more over here. It might start to lighten up when you get over to this area, because the light source, depending on where that is, could reach over here as well as it does over there. But that's your call. It is definitely going to be lighter over here than it is like right here, for sure. That's a good question too. Alright, so I'm just going to go back and blend this in and make it look finished. I don't want to end up with any of these little lines here. Okay, and I'm going to bring that right up next to my sphere so there isn't a halo effect. Okay, when we can see that extra light in between our object and the background or the ground. So I could keep working on this for so long, but I have to cut it off somewhere. I'm seeing right now this little halo in between the ground and the background, so I'm wanting to fix that. I'm going to go right over top. Okay. So I could really work on this until the end of class, but I want you guys to get started on it, and you know how to kind of finish. You're just blending everything together, making this look as 3D as possible. Look, I'm already wanting to go back and fix it. Okay, do you guys have questions about this?
No.
No? Really? Okay, cool. Thank you for recording it. I appreciate it.